Democratic senators grilled top Justice Department and FBI officials on Tuesday for not declaring January 6th rioters' crimes as domestic terrorism, as judges continue to sentence those involved for their crimes. Senator Ted Cruz pressed senior FBI official Jill Sanborn on whether FBI agents or informants took place in the assault on the Capitol. Let's watch.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
What a joke. According to journalist Glenn Greenwald, quote, "There's been ample reason to believe the FBI's involvement in January 6th was significant, and it seems extremely unlikely that if the FBI had numerous ways to know of any organized plots regarding the January 6th riot." Glenn is here now to discuss this with us. Welcome, Glenn.
Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that point? I mean, actually, Adam Kinzinger had this hilarious tweet within the last 15 hours where he actually thanked Ray Epps, who was the person that was on the FBI wanted list, removed from the FBI wanted list. And we know there's plenty of video of him basically encouraging people to enter the Capitol the day before. The January 6th committee, which is a partisan committee, says they interviewed him. He was not involved in the FBI, and Adam Kinzinger said he thanked him for his involvement. What does that actually tell us, if anything, about the FBI's involvement in this?
I don't think it tells us much at all, and I think we should be careful not to let the Ray Epps question, which is important, distract from the broader facts, which are that even before January 6th, well before January 6th, the U.S. security state, principally the FBI and the Homeland Security Department, were emphatic that the greatest threat to American national security came not from foreign threats like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Russia or China, but from what they call domestic extremist groups, so right from American soil. So it would be bizarre, given their claim, if they weren't engaged in all kinds of infiltration efforts against the groups they regard to be domestic extremists, given that they were proclaiming those to be the greatest threat to American national security. We know for a fact that they've used tactics like infiltrators and informants, provoking people into plots throughout the first war on terror. I reported on that for a decade. We know that they did that in the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, which made a big splash prior to the election. But it turns out at least half the people involved, at least half, including the leaders, were working at the behest of the FBI. And what we know about January 6th, though limited, is still significant, which is that the three groups the FBI claims were primarily responsible for organizing it, the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys, are all groups in which the FBI had its tentacles. And even the New York Times says that the FBI had at least one informant on the ground with whom it was communicating during the protest of January 6th. So all these questions, like how many FBI informants were in these groups and how many FBI informants or agents were on the ground participating in January 6th, are things the committee refuses to tell us, even though the questions are urgent, given what little we have been able to ascertain for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why the Ray Epps thing is a really easy, shiny object that can distract from these broader problems, because it gets into exactly what you were talking about, Glenn. There's so many other questions here, and it allows the committee to just sort of say, look, asked and answered, another silly conspiracy theory debunked. Now, Cruz asked about Ray Epps yesterday. Epps, of course, is a suspected federal agent who was recorded telling crowds on the evening of January 6th they had to, quote, get into the Capitol tomorrow. He acted so strangely, in fact, that people began shouting "Fed" at him. On the day of January 6th, Epps was seen whispering to a man standing in front of the barricades around the Capitol. Minutes later, video shows the man Epps whispered to tearing down the barricades and storming the grounds. Cruz questioned the FBI specifically on Epps' role in all of this. Let's watch that.
Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir, similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
Shortly thereafter, the FBI put out a public post seeking information on individuals connected with violent crimes on January 6th. Among those individuals, in the bottom there, is Mr. Epps. The FBI publicly asked for information identifying, offering cash rewards for information leading to the arrest. This was posted, and then sometime later, magically, Mr. Epps disappeared from the public posting. According to public records, Mr. Epps has not been charged with anything. No one's explained why a person videoed urging people to go to the Capitol, a person whose conduct was so suspect the crowd believed he was a Fed, would magically disappear from the list of people the FBI was looking at.
And then the January 6th committee tweeted out, the select committee is aware of unsupported claims that Ray Epps was an FBI informant based on the fact that he was on the FBI wanted list and then was removed from the list without being charged. Yeah, unsupported because they won't answer any questions. I mean, listen, Glenn, if Ted Cruz, a U.S. senator, can't get questions answered from the FBI, then who can? Because I know I can't. I mean, I'm not going to be able to get those. The average person isn't going to be able to get those questions answered. If Ted Cruz can't, who can get these questions answered?
The entire purpose of the Congressional January 6th committee, we're told, is that this was such a momentous event in American history, this 3-hour riot by 1,000 Trump boomers and Gen Xers from Facebook, that we need to know everything about it, the way we needed to investigate the 9/11 attack. We need to get to the bottom of everything, have all the facts. One of the critical questions that the 9/11 Commission examined was what role did the FBI and the other security state agencies play in the failures that led up to 9/11? Why didn't they detect that plot? What is it that they knew? What information were they in possession of in advance that they failed to use it to stop, and why? The January 6th committee seems to have zero interest in any of those questions. Like asking, well, you were saying well before the January 6th that these groups are a grave threat. Did you have informants implanted in them? And if not, why not? And if so, how did that not help you know that the January 6th riot or coup or insurrection or whatever you want to call it is coming? So there is a body that should be answering these questions. That's the body that's steadfastly refusing to look into any of this and seems to be very eager to malign any of these questions as crazy right-wing conspiracy theories.
And Glenn, you mentioned earlier your reporting after 9/11 on the FBI's involvement in some of these similar kind of infiltration situations. And we reported at the Federalist this week on Andrew McCabe sort of making this explicit parallel. He's talking about how he learned his lessons from doing this over the course of the 2010s and the aughts. And those lessons should now be applied to what he lumps into this huge definition of domestic extremism. I mean, this is like explicit. They've made it clear that's exactly what they're doing. So what are the parallels that are clear to you as somebody who reported on this extensively at the time and is doing it now? How much of this is being repeated again, but with domestic right-wing, that category this time around?
Yeah, one of my primary frustrations, or if you want to be a little bit stronger or more accurate, discuss with the left, is the refusal to acknowledge the exact replica of the model that was used in the first war on terror that they claimed to be so upset by at the time versus what they're now doing on domestic soil. Mm-hmm. The parallel is so clear that the legislation Adam Schiff has been pushing for 3 years now to change the domestic laws so that the second war on terror can be fought more aggressively does nothing but take the entire set of legislative authorities that were used in the first war on terror and just amend them to say not just foreign terrorist organizations, but also domestic terrorist organizations, to essentially implant en masse the first war on terror that was primarily aimed at foreign terrorist organizations and allow it to be used against domestic terrorist organizations. And among the worst abuses of the war on terror was that they would target young, vulnerable Muslim kids, vulnerable because they had like emotional problems or financial problems, and they would catch some Muslim in some unrelated crime, like a financial crime, and they would say, you're going to go to federal prison for 15 years unless you act as our informant. We want you to go infiltrate this mosque and try and lure people into plots that we design. And they would like offer these kids who are from poor families lots of money to join these plots or manipulate them emotionally to do so. And then they would do so, and the FBI would swoop in at the last minute and announce in a press release congratulating itself for having saved us all from the plot that the FBI itself actually concocted. And then everybody would applaud and they'd give more money to the FBI. So of course they're using the same tactics. Of course they have infiltrators and informants and agents in all of these groups. but nobody seems interested, at least nobody who can find out to what extent that played a role in January 6th.
And they won't even answer questions. And also, just to mention, the Justice Department announced yesterday that they have formed a new domestic terrorism unit to address the growing threat of domestic terrorism in the United States. The growing threat that is potentially being fueled by the FBI. Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the list of domestic terrorist groups that the Department of Homeland Security regards as threats, it's not just right-wing groups, it's animal rights groups, it's environmental groups, it's anti-government groups, it's essentially anyone who in any way challenges status quo power. That's what makes this so pernicious, to put it on domestic soil.
They should just rebrand it from the war on domestic terror to the war on civil liberties. They're dropping the pretense, basically, anyway. Glenn Greenwald, thank you as always.
Great to talk to you guys. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, tomorrow on Rising, I have to go back to my day job. I won't be with you, but Kim and Ryan will be here holding down the fort while Robbie is back next week. But don't worry too much. I'll be here for the panel. Apparently that means I need to set my alarm. I had forgotten that I'll be on the panel tomorrow. And Judd Legum will be here to discuss the Red Lobster employees that have been working without sick pay during the entire pandemic. Then author Amelia Pang discusses her new book, Made in China.
Yeah, well, Emily, thank you so much for being here today. And I know I was out these last couple of days, and Robbie was gone, and you were here. And then tomorrow it's going to be Ryan and I bright and early, and you're going to be back for a panel. So I know it's very confusing.
It's so confusing.
But nonetheless, it's always a great show. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. And we will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Including me, apparently.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.